Imagine it's the not too distant future. The war is over, and the many decades of occupation have been ended. Just like in so many other decolonial and national liberation struggles throughout history, Palestine has finally won. Palestine is free. Those who fought, those who survived, and those who've returned have managed to rebuild the country's vital infrastructure. Its water treatment plants, hospitals, schools, places of worship. And now Palestinians are embarking on ambitious new projects like this. Welcome to episode 1 of the Palestine National Zoo. I'm Pylon John, and as we get started, just a quick reminder that if you support this kind of content and want to see more of it, liking, commenting, and subscribing to this channel go a long way. So here we're getting started on the guest entrance building. The style and the materials are taken from my Palestinian village build, also in Planet Zoo. You might notice the houses copied into the background here for reference. I'll be drawing on the research I did on Palestinian architecture and flora for that video, so make sure to go check it out if you want to know more. You can see me recolor building materials so that they resemble the local earth and stone of this biome. High ceilings and lots of ventilation should naturally help to keep this building cool. This series will also draw on some work I did on an unfinished project inspired by the nearby Giza Zoo in Egypt. And of course, it'll be inspired by a number of awesome Planet Zoo YouTubers, but none more than ZSH Plays, especially his San Bernardino Zoo. Here you can see me create a sign for the entrance. Of course, using one of Ricey's fantastic fonts from the Steam Workshop. And then I'll get to work on the interior of the building. You'll see me try out a few different colors and stylistic choices here. And then I'll try to figure out where to place this modular gift shop. I actually haven't used this feature since it was added to the game. Since this section of pathing is actually elevated, it forced me to be a little clever in figuring out how to hide the curb. For the flooring, I went with black plaster covered with panes of glass. That ended up looking kind of like tiles. So on one side of this building will be the gift shop, and on the other side, a guest services desk, and of course, toilets. I'll use the plaster and wooden arbor pieces from the Africa pack. And this lovely font by Robin Bird, again from the Steam Workshop. We'll place one large screen behind the guest services counter and 3 more side by side up here. We'll design some images for them later. Then we can place some doors for the staff. And only the staff. I think the gift shop looks pretty good. And I've labeled some ATMs as ticket vending machines for those who didn't buy them in advance online. I also placed some ticket machines outside, but ignore those, I'll get rid of them in a minute. What I really want to show you is this fountain. I think this is the Alpine ibex statue, and it looks a lot like the mountain gazelle, Palestine's national animal. I admit that the water effects on that fountain still need some work though. In the wings of this building, I'll hide some staff facilities and a generator. And I'll add another washroom for guests with access from outside. Next, I'll get started on the roof, which is pretty straightforward for this central part of the building. It's the wings that make things a little complicated. I'll have to start by building another wall segment. And then piece together a lot of little bits to get the job done. This one is just what the doctor ordered. Let's just make sure everything's the right color. And with that, our entrance is just about done. Now we'll move into the zoo and start by laying a path toward our first habitat. After watching a video by Leaf on how to choose an entrance animal for your zoo, I decided to go with some kind of monkey. They're active, they're noisy, they're not shy. They're the perfect animals to greet guests as they come into the zoo. For real-life inspiration, I first turned to zoos in the present-day Gaza Strip and the West Bank. But sadly, those zoos aren't exactly models I'd want to replicate, mostly because of the conditions imposed by the occupation. So I looked at the Jerusalem Biblical Zoo. It began as an Israeli zoology professor's small collection of animals mentioned in the Bible, and it later turned its attention to breeding endangered species from Asia and Africa. That'll be the focus here too, especially since Palestinians know a thing or two about being endangered. So here you're watching me try out a bunch of different bad ideas that I'll end up scrapping later. One I'll keep though is having this path slope gently upwards. I'll use our friend the angry archer here to make sure that it's not too steep. So this is what I came up with, and I'm not too happy with it, so I'll turn to the Steam Workshop for inspiration. And find this Nat'l cage by Delay Designer. It's just about the perfect size. With just a few modifications, I think it'll work great. One of those modifications was to replace the mesh with this one. And that was for a few reasons. One of them being that it would be easier for the monkeys to climb, and another being that it would allow the guests a better view of them. It only occurred to me later that the openings in the mesh might actually be large enough to let the smallest monkeys get through IRL. But I decided to keep it anyway. Let's replace this back quarter of the cage with a square-shaped indoor shelter for the monkeys. The care manual for old world monkeys suggests that there be at least 2 doors to prevent dominant animals from blocking access to the others. It also recommends the construction of a shift yard to temporarily contain all or some of the animals. And we're definitely gonna try to meet at least the minimum real-life requirements indicated in the animal care manuals. This is meant to be a fairly modest zoo, in part because it should be affordable to build, maintain, and visit. And in part because I'm just not as good at this game as someone like ZSH Plays, Delay Designer, or Leaf. Still, as a zoo specializing in breeding endangered species to maybe eventually be reintroduced into the wild, we've got to make sure that they have everything they need to be happy, healthy, and, amorous. The interior of this indoor area will be made out of concrete for sanitary reasons, because it's easier to clean. Now we'll build the monkeys some indoor sleeping quarters. The care manual recommends at least 3 rooms per group. I don't know if these should have doors that the keepers can lock, but I just didn't feel like building them. Then we can place some bedding for the monkeys, a couple of water sources, and a few other props for realism. I tried not to go too crazy on behind-the-scenes areas that guests won't see. Now I'll get to work on building some doors for the keepers here. That should do it. We'll just copy that and put another one over here. Then I'll create smaller versions of these for animal transfer doors. And because the monkeys should have ample opportunities to climb around even while indoors, I'll add these beams here. Then we can place a null barrier around the whole thing. And maybe some more logs to the exterior to give additional support to the structure and cover up the rest of these metal bars. Now for some climbing structures for the monkeys. I'll start with the ones available in-game, modify them a little bit, and add some arboreal feeding platforms. Although I might have placed some of them a little too high for the keepers to be able to access. And I'll connect everything together with ropes and beams at a few different heights, allowing the monkeys various pathways through the habitat. I'll throw in a few more ladders too. We might imagine either the monkeys or the keepers using these. Next up, we need some food enrichment items. Let's start with this forage box. And this tree forager. And then some toy enrichment items like this ball. I think we might be able to squeeze in a few more climbing beams. Now, with the monkey enclosure nearly complete, we've got to worry about the guest side of things. Specifically, keeping the guests away from the mesh and making sure they don't do anything stupid like sticking their fingers through or throwing food in. For this, we'll reuse the wooden arbor piece to create a small fence segment that we can copy and paste all the way around. We still have to add some plants to this habitat, but first I'll do a little terrain painting, adding some grass around the edges, and in spots where it might realistically grow. For plants, I'm trying to strike a balance between species native to Palestine and those from the monkey's native habitat that we might reasonably be able to grow here. This coconut tree is too big though. For example, I'll place some date palms back here, even though they're not climbable in-game. I think these tree ferns are though, at least the bigger ones. With the trees in place, we can now get to work adding some smaller plants. And we'll start along the edge of the habitat here with these century plants. And we can use these plants to fill in the gap between the fence and the mesh of the habitat, as well as between the path and the fence. Although for that, I'll later remove the plants and use these moss decals, recolored to match the surface of the path. That looks much cleaner. One thing I noticed is that Palestine has been completely excluded from the Zoopedia. For animals native to the region, it indicates Israel, but not Palestine. In my book, that's a big L for frontier developments. However, I've also added a bunch of modded animals from Nexus mods, like the mountain gazelle, and thankfully this one does say Palestine. And I would hope so, especially considering it's the national animal and is definitely going somewhere in this zoo. But first we're gonna take a look at another modded animal, the rollaway monkey. Its native habitat is the Ivory Coast and Ghana, and it's critically endangered. So this little guy should be perfect as the first inhabitant of the Palestine National Zoo. And here he comes now. And there he goes. Credit to Mega Kebab for creating this mod, and to Terminator 9981 for uploading it to Nexus. It is a little weird that this monkey would be bothered by some grass simply because it's not the species that grows in his native habitat, so one thing I'm going to do is go into the settings and disable animal plant need. I'm also going to have to find him some friends since he won't be very happy living on his own here, and this is supposed to be a breeding zoo. And I'll also need to figure out how the heck he got out of the enclosure. Probably need to reinforce the mesh. And I think that'll do it for the first episode of the Palestine National Zoo. Thank you very much for watching. And remember, if you appreciate this kind of content and want to see more of it, liking, commenting, and subscribing help make that happen. I'm Pylon John. Until next time, Free Palestine.